To illustrate the potential of such a journey, we will recount the story of our own relationship. My husband and I first met at the wedding of his best friend, when we were both 22 years old. I experienced what I have come to understand as a profound and immediate attraction to him. Mark also demonstrated clear indications of interest in me the very next day after the wedding. Once more, in the park where our inaugural encounter occurred, our bond was marked by fervor and intensity. Mark epitomized the ideal male partner, embodying the qualities I had long awaited. He was astute, benevolent, dashing, robust, and equitable. He strove to elevate my spirits when I was despondent, to bolster me in challenging circumstances, and to assist me with my concerns. I supported his ideal, and I loved him with all my heart. After 1 year, we began living together, and another year later, we were married. The initial difficulties of our marriage arose when my husband was never lazy and always tried to help me with everything. There were never situations where I worked around the house while he did nothing. He simply wasn't that kind. Despite the fact that we cooked together, cleaned together, and did everything together, problems still struck our family. Financial problems were a significant issue for us as a young couple. We didn't earn as much money as we would have liked, which occasionally led to conflicts. One such conflict escalated into our first major quarrel. As a result, I left home for 2 weeks. Despite his Mark's confrontational nature made reconciliation seem unlikely. I was too proud to take the initiative in the evenings, so I simply waited for him to make the first move. One evening, Mark's best friend Donovan, whom I had met at his wedding, came to see me. We were also friends, so he came to support me after seeing how upset I was. We talked about nothing in particular, and our conversation was very easy and casual. I was so relaxed that I didn't even notice when it turned into a passionate kiss. We spent that night together, and I didn't regret our actions. It was a fitting consequence for my husband's apathy. Nevertheless, just 3 days later, Mark approached me with a bouquet of roses, expressed remorse for his actions, and implored me to return as soon as I saw my beloved. The veil seemed to lift from my eyes, and I came to understand my actions. However, it was too late, so I chose to move on and attempt to make amends with my husband. We reunited, and my husband became much more attentive to me. Everything was ideal until I discovered I was pregnant. I was overcome with disbelief when I discovered that the child's father was not my husband, but Donovan. I grappled with the decision for an extended period, yet I was unable to reach a resolution and continued to refrain from taking action until it was no longer feasible to terminate the pregnancy. Consequently, the dilemma of whether to proceed with the birth or not emerged. 6 months later, I gave birth to a son. Each night after leaving the maternity hospital, I gazed at Mark and James and wept, recognizing that my actions had resulted in a betrayal of my devoted husband. I was compelled to reveal the truth, yet I was unable to endure the pain of inflicting further distress upon him. Throughout the duration of my pregnancy, he exhibited a profound sense of elation, proclaiming to all those around him that his beloved wife would soon bear him a son. He also recounted how he initially gazed at his child in the maternity ward and was overcome with emotion, stating, "My little son, my joy, my father's pride." This was the name he bestowed upon our son. How could I possibly inform him that this narrative was, in fact, a fabrication? Ultimately, I resolved to reveal the truth, but only when James had reached a sufficient age to comprehend the situation. However, this opportunity never arose, as I continued to perpetuate the deception. 14 years elapsed, and our family life was characterized by a sense of harmony and contentment. I had long forgotten about this deception because a father is not the one who gives birth but the one who raises. However, as is often the case, the truth eventually came to light. My husband discovered and read my letters written to his best friend but never sent by me. This occurred during a move, when he found the letters in a box that I had left behind. Upon reading them, he realized that I had been unfaithful. When I returned home in the evening, I found him standing by the window in the darkness holding those letters in his hands. I immediately knew that he knew my husband. He did not speak, but his silence conveyed his understanding. He regarded me with an expressionless gaze, his eyes devoid of any emotion. I was overcome with emotion and began to weep. I implored him for forgiveness and attempted to elucidate the circumstances surrounding my actions. However, he remained silent. I was fully cognizant of my misdeed and was prepared to accept any consequence. However, Mark abruptly departed from the window and sat on the couch, weeping. Witnessing this, I became uncontrollably distraught. I was unable to cease my tears, and he continued to gaze into the void, his own eyes brimming with tears. Then he rose from his seat, uttered no words, and departed the apartment. I continued to weep, recognizing that I had irreparably damaged my husband's life. James, our only child, was 38 years old. We had desired to have another child, but my health issues had prevented this. My husband had devoted his life to caring for his best friend's child. The child had become the focal point of his existence. He had become my husband's pride and joy. That night, I was consumed with thoughts of my actions. I considered ending my own life because of our son. The next morning, my husband returned home. He did not speak to me. Instead, he gathered his belongings. Despite my attempts to prevent him from leaving, he took his belongings and departed. 2 months have passed since that moment, yet I persist in seeking meetings with my beloved and attempting to beg for his forgiveness. I may be foolish to believe that I still have a chance, given that Mark has not yet filed for divorce and continues to communicate with our son daily. Donovan discovered his paternity only a year after the birth. I had assumed that this news would not affect him, but to my great surprise, paternal feelings awakened in him. He proposed that I leave my family and be with I had given birth to his child, and he and his wife did not have children and did not foresee a need for them in the near future. I therefore declined his proposal, having always loved only Mark and having felt nothing but friendly sympathy for James's biological father, just as he felt for me. I was unwilling to allow him to ruin his family as a result of this mistake and equally reluctant to permit him to do so with mine. In my letters, I implored him to refrain from interfering in our lives and to leave everything as it was. I informed him of my profound love for my husband and son. I held a deep affection for our family, yet there was no necessity for me to communicate with them. Donovan, in response to my repeated requests for privacy, came to understand that a marriage formed on impulse and without love would not lead to a positive outcome. Instead of continuing to send me money, which I had previously accepted as unofficial child support, he began sending it to Mark. Donovan eventually ceased all contact with me, although he maintained a friendship with Mark for the past 14 years. It was only when the truth was revealed in the letters that evening that I came to understand the full extent of the deception. I am uncertain as to why I retained those letters, but it may have been due to my foolish sentimentality. Ultimately, it resulted in the loss of the most valuable aspect of my life, my family. My husband has consistently demonstrated admirable qualities, yet following our initial significant disagreement, I behaved in a regrettable manner, driven by spite towards him. I chose to leave our residence, not to seek the company of Mark, but rather to stay with my brothers for a period of 2 weeks. Following the dispute with Mark, we frequently conversed by telephone. He attempted to provide reassurance and encouragement, urging me to return to my husband. However, I was awaiting Mark's own initiative. Given their friendship, I anticipated that he would eventually address the matter. After all, Donovan continued to remain silent. One evening when my brother was not at home, Donovan called and suggested that I come over. He said that such things happen in many families and that I just needed to distract myself. I agreed without hesitation and he came over. As you can imagine, the rest is history. Today, my son is returning home after spending the weekend with his father. He told me over the phone that they talked to his father about the future of our family. I have been on edge all day wondering what Mark said to our son. He would not lie to him. If our son was amenable to returning home, it is probable that he would have informed James of the circumstances. Aside from that incident, I have not been unfaithful to my husband. It was a singular misstep over the course of our 16-year marriage. Our son is unaware of his biological father's identity, and I hope that he will remain so. He holds Mark in high regard and takes pride in having such a father. His relationship with his biological father is even more robust than his relationship with me. If he were to discover the truth at this juncture, it would undoubtedly cause him significant distress. A great deal has transpired over the past week. My son spoke with Mark, yet Mark did not provide any definitive information regarding the future of our family. However, the possibility of reuniting with him was not rejected on Tuesday. I ultimately decided to engage in a straightforward conversation with my husband, so I invited him to a restaurant for a date, similar to the ones we had in the past. Mark agreed almost immediately, which instilled a sense of optimism that the outcome could be favorable. We did not linger at the restaurant for an extended period and instead opted for a stroll in the park, which lasted for over 4 hours. During this time, we reminisced about our past, recalling the depth of our mutual affection and the exceptional quality of our relationship. We then proceeded to discuss the future. I requested that my husband return to the family, but he did not respond. Despite the evident desire for reconciliation that evening, I deliberately sent our son to stay with a friend, leaving the apartment empty and my husband aware of this arrangement. We spent the night together, reminiscent of past occasions. In the morning, we had limited time to converse, as we were both preoccupied with work. The evening in question, during which my son and I were having dinner, Mark unexpectedly arrived with his belongings. The sheer joy that James and I experienced at that moment is indescribable. Our son even jumped into his father's arms in celebration. Could it be that he truly forgave me? Most worrisome is the possibility that, after living with me for a while, he will realize that he no longer wants this family. However, I love him so much that I am willing to do anything to make up for my actions. My husband did not initiate a discussion about fatherhood following his return. While he does not deny the events that transpired, he does not exhibit any hostility or negativity towards me. Most importantly, his relationship with James has remained unchanged. Yesterday evening, we discussed our son's future. We noted that in 4 years, our child will reach adulthood and potentially embark on his own journey. Mark expressed pride and independence in his role as a father. However, we contemplated the prospect of expanding our family by welcoming another child. I intend to schedule an appointment with a medical professional in the near future, and I informed my husband of this decision. He displayed visible joy at the prospect of another child. It was evident that he genuinely rejoiced at the news. I have decided to become a mother again. It has been over a month since I last communicated with him. I have initiated a course of treatment, and my husband has provided me with moral support. It is imperative that we do not dwell on the past if we believe the doctors. There are decent chances of conceiving, carrying, and successfully giving birth to a child after the treatment is over. However, it is important to note that the treatment is not cheap and will take a significant amount of time. My husband and I are prepared to overcome any difficulties for our happiness. In retrospect, I recognize the gravity of my decision, but it is crucial to understand that time cannot be reversed. I must accept responsibility and live with the consequences of my actions. With regard to the family of the biological father of my child, the situation is not optimal. Mark and Donovan have not communicated for several months. I had assumed that this matter was concluded, but I was mistaken. I am unsure of how, but Donovan's wife has learned that he has a child with me. I cannot fully describe the extent of her disappointment and pain resulting from the betrayal of both her husband and me, her closest friend. Essentially, she now feels the same as my husband was betrayed by the 2 individuals with whom he was closest. However, since she discovered the affair, we have only conversed on one occasion, which was marked by her emotional outbursts and physical aggression. Since then, we have not spoken. I have not attempted to contact her. I am aware that she will never forgive me. I have hoped that she would reconsider and reconcile with her husband. Despite the possibility of another chance, last week she filed for divorce and removed Donovan from the marital residence. What I am most ashamed of in this whole story is not even before Alice and Donovan but before their 2 daughters, who are still young, 12 and 5 years old. As a result of my mistake, their family is now ruined. 6 people have suffered because of me. My beloved husband, who devoted his entire life to his family, and my son, who will never know that his beloved father whom he idolizes is not his, have also been affected. The biological one is my closest friend, who has lost her marriage as a result of my actions and is now a single mother with 2 children. Her 2 young daughters have lost their beloved father, and Donovan has suffered the most of all. He was a friend who was inseparable from her for over 15 years. She no longer wants to see him, and her daughters do not even allow her to communicate with their father. They have been convinced that he is a traitor. His apartment, which he worked for half of his life to own, will now be taken from him by his ex-wife. The wife will now take away all this suffering and pain, which I have caused. I am unsure if I have the right to have children. Why did my beloved forgive me? Why didn't he turn away from me? I began treatment to have a child, but it was unsuccessful. Ultimately, we decided it was futile and that there would be no positive outcome. These procedures are expensive. My husband initially reacted normally. It was not until later that I became aware of the extent of the pain it caused him. The most distressing incident occurred at the end of the summer. Our son discovered the truth, which I had hoped to keep from him. I had believed that I could shield him from the consequences of my actions. I had prayed for guidance, but when James found out the truth, he became distant and changed in a short period of time. He underwent a profound and irreversible transformation, becoming a person we no longer recognize. He has become callous and hostile towards us, his family. For nearly 4 months, we have endured a living hell. Our son has started consuming alcohol and smoking marijuana, and he frequently stays out all night. We are uncertain about his whereabouts and are concerned about his associations. He has formed friendships with individuals of questionable character, and seeing them gives me chills. These are shady girls with a reputation that is known throughout the neighborhood. Despite the involvement of the police, a significant resolution to the domestic issues has yet to be achieved. The search for the runaway child has become a primary focus, with the understanding that there have been developments regarding Mark and our son. Our son's negative sentiments towards Mark have intensified, despite a previous close attachment. The statements made by Mark to his father are a source of concern. While our son's actions are a reflection of his age and the influence of external factors, the impact of our actions on his development is also a cause for reflection. He did not merit such treatment. He has endured a great deal of suffering since the truth came to light, and James. We then made the decision not to have a child of our own. Now, in addition to these difficulties, Mark is experiencing cardiac issues. A month ago, he was taken to the hospital with a seizure. The medical team initially believed it was a heart attack, but thankfully it was not. However, he is now on medication and may require surgery in the future. The doctors advised him to avoid stress, yet our son continues to have seizures. I attempt to mitigate any instances of distress that I perceive in my husband, but I am ultimately constrained in my ability to do so. The pain and resentment that he harbors are evident, manifesting in prolonged periods of silence and inactivity. I have advised him of the potential risks associated with depression and its impact on cardiovascular health, yet he remains unresponsive. Despite his relatively young age of 39, he appears to have aged significantly, exhibiting pronounced wrinkles and dark circles under his eyes. I find myself in a daily struggle to cope with the challenges I have created for myself, and I find myself frequently expressing frustration. I am responsible for my own mistakes and betrayals. I pray to God to bring peace and tranquility to our family, but I no longer believe in the existence of a higher power or in the possibility of a happy ending for us. I have come to realize that it was foolish to hope that such a crime would go unpunished. My betrayal has had a devastating impact on the lives of 6 people, and I bear responsibility for that. Donovan's situation is even more dire. He and Alice divorced, and she subsequently terminated the relationship, and he was forced to fend for himself. His former spouse, who had been his closest friend, also proved to be an unreliable partner, and he was unable to recover from her infidelity. Despite my attempts to communicate with her on several occasions, she would become enraged and resort to profanity and threats. She had always exhibited a lack of moral fortitude, and I had effectively broken her. Their daughters currently reside with her in a 1-bedroom apartment. My mother's suitors no longer disturb me, as I have taken refuge in a bedroom apartment. I have not heard from Donovan for 6 months since their divorce. Then, on December 31st, I experienced a moment of happiness and joy, but it was not shared by me. My husband went to his parents in another city where James is. I have no idea where he is, as he does not answer the phone. I have no friends left, and people have started avoiding our family. As if we were lepers, I sit at the table with a bottle and cry. These are not tears of joy. They are tears of loneliness. The previous New Year's Eve was celebrated in the midst of a harsh winter. The question arises as to whether it is worthwhile to continue living. The hope for happiness in the forthcoming year persists, yet it is acknowledged that this may be an unrealistic expectation. It is not the intention to negatively affect the mood of the individual with whom this is being discussed. The aim is to facilitate a cathartic conversation that can purify the soul. As we conclude our exploration of the intricacies of human relationships, it is hoped that the following sentiments will be conveyed. Your support is greatly appreciated, and it is anticipated that we will have the opportunity to interact further in the future.